You're listening to a podcast from thespoilist.com. Welcome to First Contact, the Star Trek podcast fans' podcast of choice 5 years running. I'm Andrew.
I'm James.
And I'm Alex.
This time we are watching A Matter of Time. It first aired the week of 18th November 1991. It was written by Rick Berman and directed by Paul Lynch. James, what is this one all about?
While the Enterprise tries to save a planet suffering from an environmental disaster, a historian, apparently from the future, arrives on the Enterprise to observe the events. His eccentric manner infuriates some of the crew, except Dr. Crusher, but I'm not sure what they were trying to do there. Anyway, they save the planet with some phasers and deflectors because they can solve all problems, and the Time Guy is revealed to be a con artist from the past. And that's about it.
Well, Alex, you'd never seen this episode before. What did you think of it?
Well, I'd never seen it, but I think at this point we can sort of recognise recurring vague story tropes, you know. This week it's terse meeting, this week it's kidnap plot, and this week it's annoying prick comes onto the ship for one episode. We've been there before. We've had various degrees of annoying pricks, each with their own unique annoyingness, but it's of that mould. I thought it was quite enjoyable. There was a point in the middle where I sort of thought we are having a lot of repetition of basically the same scene, but I felt that it managed to then pick that back up again in the third act.
It feels very standard because you have the kind of, I guess, this is what the Enterprise is doing this week plot, which is we're going to save a planet from an asteroid collision, we're going to use the phasers, and that's going to go wrong, another problem. And then you've got the kind of human plot, which is also a science fiction plot, but that's not really the day-to-day business of the Enterprise, but you have a character, an antagonist who's come in to rub people the wrong way slightly, and that has so much mileage in it. I guess it depends on the guest star. I mean, this time it's Max Headroom himself, Matt Frewer, who I guess you can take or leave it, depending on your tastes. It could have been much worse.
Oh, I think he fits the role here. I think if it was more than one episode, it would grate. But for one episode, it works well enough.
See, Alex, you described him as an annoying prick, and I think that's really harsh. Rasmussen is the really good, the really strong part of this for me. His performance is what makes it memorable.
Oh, no, don't get me wrong. I agree with you. I mean, annoying to the crew.
Right, okay.
No, he's absolutely the thing that this lives or dies by. And you're quite right, Andrew, with a different person in that role, it could be a lot worse. You need someone that's not going to overplay it, but plays it with just enough of a comedic edge. Enough to be annoying to the crew.
You had the Schizoid Man back in the early days, and that was written with Patrick McGowan in mind, and obviously this episode feels very much like the guest role has been written with someone in mind, and probably, again, someone that they might not have got in the end.
Which, of course, was Robin Williams. Because he had... I'm not sure if they had agreed to do it with him and he pulled out because of Hook, or whether they just thought that he would do it because he's a Star Trek fan, but then couldn't because he was doing Hook.
I can't do it because I'm doing Hook sounds like the excuse of a desperate man.
That's the only reason he ended up on Hook.
That's just an extravagant version of I'm doing Panto. Can't do comic relief this year, love. Doing Panto. Such a shame. Do hit me up next year.
There is an element where they got Whoopi Goldberg, probably at the height of her career, and she's like, I love Star Trek, I want to do Star Trek, and that worked out. And there's so many suggestions. During the movie era, Tom Hanks comes up all the time because they heard Tom Hanks is a Star Trek fan, and no way is Tom Hanks going to do a Star Trek film. His agent wouldn't let him. But you wonder how often in these cases...
I don't know why, I just imagine Tom Hanks as Shinzon.
Ah, now come on, guys. Can't we just work things out? Oh, you stabbed me. What do you want to do that for?
You have all these famous Star Trek fans, and obviously Star Trek, I wouldn't say it's a poisonous property, but it's maybe not a desirable one, and it's quite a difficult one, and they never really do get any of these A-list kind of Star Trek fans. Whoopi Goldberg is the exception, you would say. And so, yeah, Robin Williams wasn't going to do this, was he?
They got Seth MacFarlane.
What, to make the Orville?
No, he was in Enterprise.
I mean, I don't think he can really count as a fully A-list presence. They got The Rock, didn't they?
Yes, they did, in a terrible episode.
Yeah. But that said, yeah, I can absolutely see Robin Williams in this, but I can also see that being quite terrible at the same time.
See, I think he'd overplay it. But I mean, I have no basis for that because, I mean, obviously look at something like 1 Hour Photo, which is obviously one of the best things that he ever did, and that's completely the opposite of what you would expect from him. But I don't know. I also feel that if they knew it was definitely going to be him, the writers probably would also amp up the character a bit.
It is a difficult one to play because obviously he's obnoxious, but you also kind of have to like him, and he has to be strange enough that it's almost endearing. And I think they kind of pull that off. It's like you're always suspicious of him the moment he comes on board, and actually the Enterprise crew trusting him, you're just like, oh, come on, just don't even indulge this, because as you say, the whole episode is like him interacting with a character, them going, you're annoying, oh, I don't want to do my assignment, and then moving on to the next character and pretty much doing the same thing with this sciencey B plot in the background that really is the most perfunctory thing in the world. And I don't know if they necessarily do enough with all the character stuff. I feel like there could have been one particular character that he latches onto. I think they're kind of doing that with Crusher, who just looks like she's really lonely, but I don't know if she's just being nice. I honestly don't know what that relationship is, because like she's upset at the end and it's like, oh, you lied to me the most. Is she being affectionate? Because it just seems like she's sort of being a kind of patronizing teacher. I don't get what that relationship was. She was least annoyed.
She wanted to know about the future.
She had the horn.
She wanted him to tell her about the Tellurian plague.
She's always going on about the Tellurian plague, isn't she?
Many a romantic dinner date spoiled.
You see, I thought that the character who they kind of latched on to was Data. And he almost seemed a little bit more sinister around Data. Almost as if he knew he could get away with it around him.
It somewhat reminded me of The Most Toys, where Saul Rubinek plays the collector, where he wants all the rare possessions. And I think there's a sort of parallel there, and that's almost a more sinister version of this episode. Like we said fairly recently, you can do things again if you do them slightly differently, or if you do them better than before. That's quite a good episode. I think this is a sort of almost heightened comedy version of that episode.
Yeah, it's light-hearted, apart from when it seems to veer into the old robo-racism again. Although I suppose someone coming back from the future and then immediately being hateful towards the android is very much the future as shown in Picard. There you are. It's like poetry, it rhymes.
Also, they have that meeting where they discuss him, and then Picard immediately sends Data to take him to his quarters. It's like, can you not get a junior person to do that? Oh no, send the android to take the guy to his quarters and carry his bag, because we all want to talk about him and make fun of him without the android in the room.
Obviously, later on in the episode, Picard is is a bit more credulous. But he seems very willing to provide this information to this man on what? On good faith? I mean, obviously later on he doesn't trust him, but not for a while. It takes a good chunk of time.
They know that the time pod is from the future. Their sensors picked up time-space disturbance and, probably chronoton particles or something. So they know for certain that that time pod is from the future. So, in a sense, that they can distrust him, but at the same time, the evidence would suggest that he is telling the truth. He has technology way beyond theirs.
So did the Albanian State Washing Machine Company, etc., etc.
The episode probably would fall apart if you kind of said, well, actually, the observer should stay an observer. They shouldn't be interacting. They shouldn't be interviewing. They shouldn't make their presence known and saying, oh, this is a momentous occasion. Oh, well, I can't imagine what it must be like just to be here in the moment.
And in a sense, that they probably are like that. It's just that he isn't one of those people. He's from the past, isn't he?
Yes, and they do obviously raise this and say, why has no one ever heard of future historians before? There's an element of that, but obviously with the Prime Directive raised and I guess a version of the temporal Prime Directive posited by Picard, they do address that, but yeah, I feel they're very willing just to accept this person, apparently from the future, who might be changing the past, and just taking his word for it and fully engaging with him and providing lots of information. They're very trusting, and that's not something to be frowned upon.
You're right, you have to allow some of that anyway, because, I mean, at its core, it's a comedic conceit, really. I mean, it's a sitcom setup. It's workplace. It's a very indirect route to it, but it's basically workplace, and then the old person who used to work there comes back and stands over the new person going, oh, you do it like that, do you? Why, what's wrong with that? Oh, nothing. It's basically a very elaborate version of that, which, again, standard sitcom trope.
I don't think that would have been Rick Berman's intentions, if I'm honest.
No, I'm sure it wasn't. But when you boil stories down to their core vibes, there are similarities between different mediums, and that's what makes the comedy in this work. And moving the context from one setting to another, that's basically what you get.
I think if you took out the comedy, you effectively just would have had an original series style episode, wouldn't you? It seems very original series in itself.
Yeah, I suppose that the way that the original series would get around that would be to make the guest character much more arch, much more untrustworthy, a sort of moustache twirling villain almost, an Anthony Ainley master type of figure.
There's slight elements of that. I mean, when he gets put into his quarters and is then, a bit rude to Data, and then Data leaves, they do the sinister musical sting, which tells you he's a wrong'un.
Although, in the next episode that we're going to review, they do the sinister music over Alexander stealing a model of a dinosaur.
He's a creepy prick, though, so that's probably justified.
So I think we should spend some time on the plot on Penthara 4. They've had an asteroid and it's caused a nuclear winter. Lovely matte painting.
Yeah, no, I was going to ask, is that the same matte painting, just desaturated, gone a bit white?
I think it looks like a new matte painting.
It looked familiar, but I'm not sure if that's just that all of these matte paintings look kind of similar.
Well, I'm sure it was the matte painting that contributed to it winning an Emmy Award for Outstanding Individual Achievement in Special Visual Effects.
It did what? You're shitting me.
No, it shared it with another episode's conundrum,
Right.
which we will review soon.
Not that soon.
I'll be dead by then.
It's kind of faded away in my mind. It's so unmemorable. It's, there's a man in a room with Geordie. The entire stakes are... It's another one of those episodes where they're not really able to show it, despite the Emmy Award-winning special effects. Where all the stuff seems to happen on a screen, where they say, "Mr. Data, is there much carbon dioxide?" And he goes, "Yes, there's carbon dioxide. Has it reached the upper atmosphere?" "It's not reached the upper atmosphere yet." Can you check now?" "Yes, now the carbon dioxide has reached the upper atmosphere." Great, good job. And then there's volcanoes apparently going off, but you don't ever see the volcanoes except a little bit from space, which is fine. It's solution to the problem causes another problem, and then their next solution is, well, we could either save them or we could wipe out all life on the planet. What should we do? I've always been one for risk. What, really? Okay, that's fine.
It's good. There's a long established history of that within the show, and I'm sure you can cite many examples. I don't know about you, but whenever I see Captain Picard, I always think, oh, that inveterate risk taker.
He did get into a fight with a Nausicaan.
Although we haven't seen that yet. I know it's been talked about.
Just you wait.
It was mentioned.
It's been mentioned, but
I'm pretty sure that in one of the Wesley episodes where he's in a shuttle pod with Wesley, he talks about how he got stabbed in the heart.
That's when he's going to get his new heart, or his heart cleaned out of gunk or something. I can't quite remember.
I mean, yeah. I mean, at this stage, bearing in mind you haven't seen anything, it's one thing to say. I mean, like, I can say that when I was, 13 years old, I was in a fight with a group of 20-year-olds, but it doesn't mean it was particularly risky on my part, other than the fact I got the shit kicked out of me.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that.
Still missing part of my eyebrow today.
Were they saying to you, "Play dumb, jot, human"?
No, they didn't really say very much, to be honest. They were mostly just stamping on my head.
Oh.
Yeah. I feel that, communication is one thing, but I suppose you could say that the knuckle dusters they were wearing did all the communicating that was required, really.
On the bright side, you didn't get stabbed in the heart.
No.
Silver linings. Yes, I guess there is some serious Star Trek stuff in this. The kind of the fourth act where
is it though? It's all just it's the B plot that's just there to service the A plot. It's like the Q episodes where he becomes human, or the next episode that we're going to review.
The big discussion in the fourth act where Picard asks the question, which is a very Star Trek Picard speech, but I think it feels a little bit out of place, maybe. In the comedy episode, it's like, about Picard changing his approach with all the facts available to him, and should he break the Prime Directive if it's what he thinks is right, which, went a bit Tony Blair for my liking, to be perfectly honest. But yeah, a man of principle, but can he save lives if he has more information? Should time travelers help change the past because it's the morally correct thing to do? Should they tell them the results? I mean, that's a fair enough kind of Star Trek-y type debate.
So when I say that in the third act, it brings it back around again, because I mean the second act does have a bit of repetition of. Oh, hey, do you always do that? Do you do this? Do this? Oh, why is that an important thing? Oh, can't tell you. It is when you get into those moral debates with Picard that we start to bring it back and get into something more interesting, which then, capped with the final reveal, works quite nicely.
Is that whole thing the whole him measuring the office and looking at all the details, is that kind of not a dig at fans, but a kind of a reference to Star Trek fandom, caring where every single item is, and if it moves between episodes or seasons, then that's noted down, and they like everything to be exactly how it was and how it should be. I hadn't really considered that this was kind of a nod to Star Trek fans.
I'm not sure. I always kind of thought it was saying that history just doesn't record the small details. I thought that was just the point.
But Star Trek fans do, and they want to know what Picard's, where the fish is in Picard's ready room and why it got a bigger tank in Generations.
They published 934-page books on it and vast online databases of every conceivable piece of information.
Well, who'd waste their time reading that?
It is interesting, really, that once you know the twist and you look back on everything that Rasmussen does, he's just playing it all up. He's just pretending that all this stuff is the way history records it. Well, except for the fact that Star Trek Picard may have actually meant that this is true, but the schematics for Data, surely they're not going to be lost in the future. He's acting as if, the complete works of Shakespeare, oh no, we haven't got that in the future, can I have a copy of that?
See, now, this is one area where I do wonder, I mean, you'll obviously be both much better placed to answer this question than I will, how well this actually holds up to repeat viewings, because I think actually, weirdly, quite often with an episode of Star Trek, The Next Generation, we have said before that, you'll watch it and you're a good 10 minutes ahead of the episode. You know where things are going and you're just waiting for it to get there. With this one, I think you could quite easily take a guess and you could very well be right. But there's nothing to conclusively get you to that point until the reveal. I think actually they played that quite well compared to a lot of other episodes that they've done. But without that, on a second time, knowing where it's going, it would lose a bit of the hook for me.
And ironically, they lost Robin Williams to the hook.
I think you're right. I think once you know that he's not who he says he is, which is maybe implied throughout, but obviously it's not given away like in some episodes where you see them like before the crew doing something really sinister. But I think once he starts stealing the stuff, there's maybe a little bit of working out he may not be who he says he is. So I think it stands up fine, but it is very much an episode which is an episode. It feels mid-season, not on cruise control, but certainly not flying at the highest. It's just a decent, solid episode and probably quite forgettable. So when you're watching it again, you go, oh, was that? Oh, yeah. So, like, it stands up to repeat viewing in that it's quite forgettable, really, but with a pretty decent performance in it.
But, again, move it into an earlier season, and this would be a standout in some of those earlier seasons. It's just the competition it's up against this time round.
I think that pretty much applies for every episode of season 4 and 5, really.
Well, yeah.
I think for me, it is. I mean, Andrew, you pretty much summed it up as well as you can. It is the performance that makes it memorable. And for some reason, I think I kind of forget that the rest of the episode isn't quite as good as the performance makes it feel. Nothing against the rest of the episode. It's a perfectly fine episode. It's a good script. It's a good idea, but Max Headroom is very good.
I think at the end, like, and obviously you're aware of the limitations of Star Trek Next Generation. The futuristic time-travelling pod on the inside is quite underwhelming. I don't think there's even adequate toilet facilities.
No, I've stayed in hotels like that, and it had some terrible flashbacks.
I'm sure they have like holographic toilets which beam the waste out into space.
Surely a holographic toilet, everything would just go straight through it on the floor.
No, they have force fields and things. It'll collect it all up, and then it'll beam it out into space.
Yes, this is what the designers of holographic technology had in mind.
You've just got to hope that halfway through, the power doesn't go out. Rasmussen, he's very interested in Geordie's visor. Because, of course, as he mentions, Geordie is blind, which I think might be the first time it's ever mentioned in Next Generation. They've been very subtle up to now about that. But then at the end of the episode, he has a visor amongst the things he's stealing. Where did he get that visor? I mean, I'm just imagining, like, Geordie walking into a wall or something.
I'd have loved the end of this episode if just in the background, the shot while Picard's giving his, "No, you'll have to remain here. And I'm sure that there'll be some of our scientists that are very much looking forward to speaking to someone from your century. Think on." Just in the background, just Geordie going, "Son of a... Ow! Ow!"
Just Geordie in the background without his visor on, and he says, "Oh wait, can I just get my visor?" And then the ship disappears.
I mean, they didn't get any of the stuff off the ship, did they?
No, it just goes back to the 22nd century.
Oh, wow. I'm sure it was all fine.
I'm sure if you went on Memory Alpha, someone has made some ridiculous idea that Chief O'Brien beamed it all out the ship because he had nothing else to do that day.
Why didn't Rasmussen meet Chief O'Brien?
Because they couldn't afford to pay him.
Right, let's talk about some other nonsense. In Quickfire.
Quickfire.
You might be wondering what Rasmussen did after he was sent to prison. Well, it only took 1 year for him to get out of prison. And then, according to the DS9 novel, The Big Game, he was in a big high-stakes poker tournament. And then, about 15 years later, he tried to steal a 22nd century ship for some reason and managed to escape. And then a few years after that, it turns out he'd hidden blueprints for the time travel pod and rebuilt it. And he went to the past and met an ancestor of his, and he travelled back to 1964, where he met a man called Gene Roddenberry and gave him information on the future so he could create a TV show about it. And then Rasmussen died in an automobile accident while driving to an appointment with producers at Paramount Pictures.
Oh my
God. Was it one of the Sung family that managed to kill him behind the wheel?
I hope so.
This is one of the few episodes that Rick Berman, who is the executive producer and basically owner of the Star Trek franchise at this point, regarding the episode's text subplot, Rick said, "To sit with the scene guys and research and develop it and to try and come up with something that would work, you get lost in the technical elements of it. You need other people to come up and hit you over the head and pull it back. Sometimes we succeed with that and sometimes we don't." Michael Piller had a different view of Rick writing the script, which was, "Rick and I and the staff worked long and hard with him on the script and he had a lot of challenges to overcome." So, different views of the same thing. All tells a story.
Turning with serene sadness to the Nitpicker's Guide, I could pull out something to be sniffy about, but actually something I'd want to highlight, because obviously we've mentioned before, it's getting on a bit, this book now. Next year, this book will be 30 years old. Certainly wasn't anything like that when we started this podcast. But obviously, in the space of 30 years, some meanings can change on things. Some words can become more common in a different parlance. So I just want to highlight one thing where he's talking about Rasmussen and saying, why can't LaForge sense Rasmussen's deception? In the episode Up the Long Ladder, LaForge claimed that his visor allowed him to see the psychological changes that accompany lying. He said it didn't always work on other races, but when it came to humans, he had them, quotation marks, pegged. Now, if he'd only not put the quotation marks there, I wouldn't have raised an eyebrow. But the highlight of the pegging term there suggests a whole new backstory for LaForge.
Star Trek The Next Generation is a family show, Phil Fan.
This is the first of 5 appearances of Con Officer Ensign Felton, a memorable first appearance, I think we'll all agree, and hopefully we'll be seeing more of her in Star Trek Picard Season 3.
I did look on Memory Beta to see if there was anything in spin-off media about her, but there was not.
That's really disappointing.
Yeah. There's a character that is so boring and nondescript that even the novel writers don't want to touch her. Not even a comic or a short story.
Well, what you see as an oversight, I see as an opportunity. Let's take this to a secret hideout. Let's pitch a short trek. We can tell them that she's really big with fans. They won't know.
I mean, they brought back that guy on the bus from The Voyage Home. They'll bring back anyone. Eventually, we will forget Star Trek Picard and we'll stop referencing it.
If you want to listen to episodes of us talking about Star Trek Picard Season 2, don't.
Our descent into madness.
Descent?
Well, that's it from us for another week. We hope that you'll join us again next time when we will be talking about New Ground. Until then, goodbye.
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 Maybe the holographic toilets move with you. Collect every drop.
Maybe it could be linked to the game from the previous episode. Aim for the hole,